In an extension of the theme covered in the previous episode of Satansplain, with Satanists interacting with Satanists in this day and age of internet tribalism, we'll take a look at the essay When Worlds Collide by Church of Satan High Priest Peter H. Gilmore. I'll also be answering some listener mail on lesser and greater magic, and also sharing a recording of me responding to some anti-satanic propaganda with a prank call.
Well, it's not Satan worship, it's Satanism. It's embracing the life-enriching things which have traditionally been given the devil's name. Pride, lust, earthly success, rational self-interest, atheism, humor, nonconformity, science, a passion for living, being selective about whom we love. We don't see these as shameful sins, but empowering ideals. And we also recognize the psychological power and fun of symbolism and aesthetics, so we utilize Satan as mythology's most fitting mascot for what we're about.
Satansplain, Satanic Talk with Church of Satan Magister Bill M.
Magister Bill M here with Satansplain. In this episode, I've got some listener mail I'd like to respond to first, so let's get right into that. I have an email here from Good Morning USA. That is this person's username, it seems. There are several questions here, so rather than read the full email, I'll just answer each question one at a time. Good Morning USA says, quote, "The first question I have to ask is in regards to satanic ritual. First is the importance of a flame in a candle. Due to living situations, I'm unable to use a genuine candle or burn anything indoors. And while I have candles, is too much sacrificed by doing the ritual outside at night? Could the same effect be achieved indoors with little electronic candles?" My answer to the candle question is that, personally, I find something very archetypal, if you will, and very esoteric in burning actual black candles for ritual. There is something very psychologically powerful about that because of all the mental associations that, everybody has about formalized ritual and candles, plus the fact that they've been around for millennia. Not to mention you have the element of fire. So, like I said, there was some kind of archetype power in all of that, something perhaps Jungian. It's not that there is something supernatural about wax and having a string lit on fire, but this is a point that I think seems to be lost on a lot of Satanists who think that ritual has to be 100% personalized and 100% original, or it's somehow inauthentic or confirming to older religious dogma. I'm not saying this listener here is saying that, but I have heard that from other Satanists, and I have to say it's bullshit. There is something to be said, I firmly believe, about these kinds of basic ritualistic traditions that humans have developed, like altars and candles and an image in front, center, above the altar, and so on. But again, I'm not criticizing this reader, because having said all of that, I do realize that sometimes practicality has to come first in some cases. And I know some people live in places where no open flames are allowed for some reason or another. Maybe they live in an apartment and that was part of the lease agreement or something. So I would not say electric candles are off limits. In fact, I've seen some electric candles these days that look surprisingly authentic, at least at first glance. And if you can get that same esoteric feeling with electronic candles in the background, then yeah, of course you can go for that. And as for doing a ritual outdoors or under the moonlight, that is always an option too. In any case, better to cut corners than to not do a ritual at all. As I've said on the show before, the ritual components should not be seen as links in a chain where the missing of one component, the absence of one component results in a failure. Rather, I would say think of it more like strands in a rope. The rope can still be functional with a strand or two missing, but the more strands that are incorporated, the stronger the rope will be. And I did a 2-part episode on satanic ritual a while back, where I think I expanded on that concept. Let's continue with the email. My second question pertains to LeVay stating that before greater magic can be utilized, lesser magic should be mastered. Does this negate newcomers to the religion from performing ritual, or am I missing the point here somewhere? So, as for utilizing lesser magic before greater magic, the simplest example I can think of here is the conjuration of lust. Remember that the Satanic Bible explicitly defines magic as, quote, the change in situations or events in accordance with one's will, which would, using normally accepted methods, be unchangeable. As I always point out, notice there is nothing in this definition that requires belief in the supernatural. But the Satanic Bible then further breaks magic down into two categories, lesser magic and greater magic. Lesser magic is also described as non-ritual magic or manipulative magic. Greater magic, on the other hand, utilizes a formalized ceremony in a specific time and place. So both lesser and greater magic fit the overall definition of magic that I just gave. You want to see changes in situations or events in accordance to your will. Conveniently speaking, it looks like that's not going to happen, so you apply approaches outside of the mundane to see things fall into place for you. That could take the form of using little crafty forms of psychological manipulation and subliminal cues to influence things in your favor, aka lesser magic. Or it could take the form of setting up a controlled environment where you utilize ceremony and psychodrama to dig deep into your very carnal being and sharpen that will of yours, so that things will, if you are confident enough and follow the other guidelines, fall into place for you. And that, in a nutshell, is greater magic. So the question was regarding what LeVay said about mastering lesser magic before attempting greater magic, and the listener here asks if this means Satanists should be discouraged from ritual before they, well, say, learn everything that's in the book, The Satanic Witch. Well, the short answer is no. As I said, I think a good example of this is the conjuration of lust, and let me get back to what I mean by that. Well, suppose there is somebody in your life whom you wish to sexually enchant. And this would not be possible under normal circumstances or normally accepted methods, to borrow a line from the Satanic definition of magic. Well, you could jump straight to the ritual chamber and perform a Satanic ritual on that theme. The Satanic Bible goes into detail about how to do this. There are 3 different conjurations you can employ, and one is called the conjuration of lust. It would apply here. The conjuration of lust is just a poetic manifesto you utilize in that context. But what I think LeVay is saying is that maybe instead of doing that as your first resort, perhaps you should consider what you can do in terms of lesser magic first. What are some things you can do outside of the ritual chamber? Have you tried initiating a conversation with the person you're attracted to? Have you maybe sized him or her up according to the LeVay synthesizer clock in the book The Satanic Witch, and then tried using some of those techniques to influence them? Or have you tried finding what else they might like and what triggers them in a pleasurable way and working that into some sort of thing in your manipulation? Now, Satanism is not an occult religion that says, oh, if you use a pink candle and you use a rose quartz and this kind of essential oil, and that's what will make the person supernaturally fall in love with you. No, that's not how magic works in Satanism. Again, see the definition. Also, listen to the past Satansplain episode I did on the combination lock principle. You can look that up on Satansplain.com. There are 2 more questions in this email, so let me answer them. A third question in this vein is more on the personal end. I am autistic and am intrigued with the idea of lesser magic, but am curious as to the mental roadblocks overcoming its usage. If reading people does not come naturally to me, how am I best to base what form of lesser magic I am to use? Perhaps this is just a me problem that, like any Satanist, I've got to find my own way around the circus. So, regarding this reader's question of autism, from what I understand of autism, it's not like necessarily what you see in a movie like Rain Man, that may be an extreme case, but rather there's a spectrum of different disorders, and, that example in Rain Man falls underneath this term, but lots of other things do too. I do know that some people who have autism or Asperger's or some anxiety disorder end up having problems with social skills, for lack of a better term. Now, I know there are people who may be initially attracted to Satanism for its sort of misanthropic qualities. They'll say, I hate crowds, I hate people in general. That's certainly understandable. I think most Satanists would more or less say that on the whole, they're not fans of humans in general. But quite frankly, I would argue there's a difference between being a true misanthrope and just being willfully socially retarded. And the fact of reality is that as much as we Satanists might wish we had the life of a hermit, Homo sapiens are social primates, and quite often, with the way the real world works, we do have to interact with other humans to get what we want. Now, some people are able to design their lives in such a way so as to minimize having to deal with other humans face to face, and that's great. I try to do some of that myself. But even then, there will be times when you have to call a plumber or a car mechanic or talk to somebody behind a desk at the post office or something. One of the most misanthropic guys I know is Church of Satan Magister James Sass. He owns a bookstore, which has been in business for decades. So I think it's safe to assume that he at least knows how to do simple retail things like greet customers or answer questions, help them find the book they want. You know, he's not looking to make friendships with everybody who walks through the door, of course, but he knows it's in his best interest to be professional, so he's going to conduct himself like that. Likewise, I would argue that even if you have autism or something similar to that, you can learn social skills that will benefit you. There are ways of training yourself to be mindful of body language, for example, or making eye contact and so on, if these sort of things don't come naturally to you. And I know this is the case because I know people who were diagnosed with autism or some of the other things I mentioned, but they read up on the topic or they got resources from their doctor or training from somebody and applied the techniques and made it work. Even if it didn't originally come natural to them. And I've similarly run into a few Satanists in the past who said they have dyslexia or said they were diagnosed with ADHD, and because of that, they had some difficulty reading a book in a reasonably focused way, like most other people can. Does this mean that these Satanists disregarded the Satanic Bible and never bothered reading it? Did they say, oh, well, the doctors told me I can't read anything longer than a paragraph, so that's that. Somebody give me the Satanic Bible on tape instead. I have run into impulsive people online who make excuses like that, but real Satanists who may have a diagnosed handicap, like dyslexia and so on, are able to work within it, just like any person with a handicap can. Again, there are techniques or practices they learned, and maybe they had to consciously apply, but they did it. So getting back to the topic of social skills and reading people, I would say that autism or not, these are skills. These are tricks of the trade. And even if you're convinced they don't come naturally to you, there are still ways to improve these skills. There are countless books on the topic. And that also extends to interactions beyond the basics and reading people and interacting with them in a more esoteric way. And finally, to Satanists who think that doing this kind of social interaction is just conformity or pleasing the masses, well, to that I say, if as a Satanist you fancy yourself your own god and want certain things in life, and having to deal with a human for 5 minutes will still benefit you in the long run, then, do what you have to do. As I always say, there are reasons we have certain items in the 9 satanic sins, including counterproductive pride. This same reader had one fourth and final question, which was, where might one find the other episodes of the various Radio Free Satan shows? Are they lost to time? Well, the short answer I would say is yes. Plenty of programs have come and gone from Radio Free Satan over the past 25 years it's been in existence. I'm sure the station keeps an archive of most or all of these shows on some hard drive somewhere. I myself have some recordings of past shows I've saved, Lambert's Basement, Vault of the Lost, and so on. If you're looking for recordings from a particular show, you'd probably have the most luck contacting the show's DJ directly. Speaking of Radio Free Satan, at the end of June, I put out a new episode of The Devil's Mischief. That's on radiofreesatan.com. And at the time of this recording, yes, that show is available. The Devil's Mischief is my other podcast, a comedy and novelty podcast I've been doing for quite some time. So maybe when you're done listening to Satansplain, you can check out The Devil's Mischief. In the meantime, let's take a break. You are listening to Satansplain.
You are listening to Satansplain, real satanic talk with Church of Satan Magister Bill M. For questions, comments, and correspondence, send an email to bill@satansplain.com.
Have you ever used a public toilet and noticed one of those dirty poems scrawled on the wall? Aren't they great? If you thought that sick shit was funny, you're gonna love this book series, Poems from the Bathroom Wall. These original poems are written in the same style and cover the same subject matter. Look these books up on lulu.com, that's LULU.com, and make sure that your filters are set to allow explicit content. Poems from the Bathroom Wall. Indulgence for the lowbrow connoisseur.
Handmade, all-natural, botanical perfumes, soaps, and ceremonial incense, sculptures and jewelry to adorn yourself and your other altars. All this and more await you at moonandsunemporium.com. Ritual perfumes and other occult fine art luxuries, created and curated by me, Priestess Sarah Josephine Clark, with tarot readings by Reverend Dr. Dylan Clark. moonandsunemporium.com.
Magister Bill M. here with Satansplain. Visit the main website for the show, which is satansplain.com. From there you can find every Satansplain episode. You can also listen to Satansplain on Spotify, YouTube, Audible, and a host of other places. If you're on social media, please give Satansplain a like and a follow, or whatever the equivalent is, on Facebook, X, and YouTube. Likewise, if you're listening now on YouTube, don't forget to hit that like button for this episode. For all questions and correspondence, email me directly. The email address is bill@satansplain.com. If you enjoy Satansplain and would like to show support for the show, please go to the show's page on Locals. Point your web browsers to satansplain.locals.com. You can sign up for Locals for free, but you can also additionally become a paid subscriber there. That is the best way you can support the show. Though we also have a merch store. You can go to store.satansplain.com for that. And thank you, as always, to all of you who support Satansplain in one way or another. By the way, I admittedly have not updated the shop in a while. If there is a certain design you'd like to see in the Satansplain store, let me know. Maybe it's a quote from the show that you like, or a Dr. Shit's meme, or something else. If there's something you think would look good on a t-shirt or a coffee mug or a sticker, a pillow, whatever, let me know. Drop me an email, bill@satansplain.com. There is a short essay I would like to read for you next. This is an essay from Church of Satan High Priest Peter H. Gilmore. You can find this essay and many others on churchofsatan.com. And I think it's a nice explanation on some of the topics I've covered in more recent episodes. The essay is titled When Worlds Collide, and I'm going to read it for you now. This essay begins with a quote from Anton LaVey, taken from the book Satan Wants You, published in 1988. As stated in the book, as part of this interview, quote, "When told about both members' negative feelings about their fellow members, LaVey, rather than expressing disapproval, said emphatically, 'Those are the kinds of members I want, people who can stand on their own without a bunch of slobbering idiots propping them up.'" End quote. And now the essay. Our current social media besotted culture is emphatically partisan and contrarian. Contentions are constant. Brickbats arc back and forth between febrile factions. Attendant claques applaud the conflict. While our members speak for themselves and not the Church of Satan as a whole, the internet-dwelling populace can't make that distinction. We've seen people pillory our organization for anything our members might opine to which they are opposed. Of course, we never get any kudos for sayings which they hold to be true. Denigration, not approbation, is standard procedure. It is for that reason we ended publicizing the numerous podcasts produced by our members, which are essentially discussions expounding personal opinions, not satanic dogma. People are just not willing to grasp the difference. And to pause the essay here, some of you may have noticed that the official newsfeed and social media pages for the Church of Satan do typically advertise new episodes of Satansplain. And gee, maybe that's because on Satansplain I focus on explaining things about Satanism and giving my takes on things as a Satanist, as opposed to using this show to air my personal opinions and attacks within topics like politics or music. Oh, I certainly do that on some of my personal accounts. I do my political shit-posting memes and, hot takes and all that. And there are some fellow Satanists who are interested in some of that and agree with me, vice versa, and we follow each other on channels like that for those reasons. But that is not Satansplain's format. The show is Satansplain, not the All Things Bill M Showcase Hour. I mean, I suppose I could give you my biased political rants and other opinions that don't really have much to do with Satanism per se, and then rationalize it under, I am my own god, or, well, this show is my lair, so I'm the ruler of it. But again, that's not really how Satansplain works. Saying I am my own god does not mean I'm everyone else's god. Anyway, let's get back to the essay. In the Church of Satan, when our members interact, we have long advocated civility, courtesy, and even gentility to be our norm. But the societal tide has turned. So as not to be accused of stifling anyone's freedom of expression, we won't comment upon how our wildly divergent members react to one another on their own electronic soapboxes. The liberty in your own domains to accuse, smear, mock, and agitate against one another has always been yours. Instead, you could offer appreciation, admiration, and celebration, and be one of the rare few, but I'm not holding my breath. As we know, is the common attitude, quoting Alice Roosevelt Longworth, quote, if you can't say something good about someone, sit right here by me. When speaking your minds about one another, if calumny is your cup of tea, meaning, making lies to damage somebody, be aware of copyright, libel, slander, and privacy laws. If anyone notices violations of legal parameters, take your evidence to the authorities who handle those social platforms. We expect that discerning individuals will carefully examine any statements made and evidence presented and judge accordingly. The credulous, as usual, will salute propaganda that bolsters their current opinions. In the discussion forums we manage, our moderators will honor privacy and maintain that the discourse be kept to exchanging ideas with both reason and graciousness. These should be a sanctuary from the mud wrestling now rampant and apparently enjoyed by so many. And to pause the essay again here and interject something else, years and years ago there was a great Satanism forum called Letters to the Devil. I'm sure some of you might remember that. Unfortunately, it went away, and that was basically because of the change in technology. People on the whole stopped using website message boards and were eventually doing all their communication through social media. I mean, the same thing happened before that with internet chat rooms and email lists. There were Satanism discussion places in those formats, but as the times change, so did the preferred online technology for communication. But anyway, one rule that was eventually established on that Letters to the Devil message board was no talking about politics. And that's not because Satanists aren't allowed to have their own views on politics or that there should only be one definitive view by Satanists on politics. That's not the case. I've talked about it many times. However, we did realize what many other message boards realized, satanic or not, and that is political posts turn message boards into a shit show. More often than not, they just derail in very other conversations and never go anywhere. So on Letters to the Devil, we set up a rule, no political talk, and that served us incredibly well. Years later, when people were moving to Facebook and Church of Satan members were setting up forums there, we decided to add the same rule. And hail Satan, damn, it works so well in keeping discussions on topic. Of course, this isn't to say that no Church of Satan members are free to go make their own message boards or mailing lists or discussion forums on social media where they can talk about politics. But I don't know about you. I probably won't be posting the places like that because, again, turns into a shit show. All right, let's finish up with the rest of the essay. It is important to note that, unlike most other religions, our members are not subject to any form of expected obedience to the members who might have been given degrees. Those are bestowed as tokens of appreciation for accomplishments, not a means for the establishment of rank and authority that commands submission. If any member attempts to use a title they were given by the Church of Satan to validate their position, you should insist the titled member support their point of view with evidence and reason. Arguments from authority don't hold water here. If and when hostility arises on personal platforms, it is not our duty to police and punish. Remember, you are not required to bow to other members. You need not interact with them in any way. And as stated in the 8th Satanic Rule of the Earth, do not complain about anything to which you need not subject yourself. And that is where the essay ends, but there is an addendum. Here it is. Accordingly, we have updated our Church of Satan hierarchy page with the following, quote, "Our protocol for member interaction is based on the paradigm of a mutual admiration society, and this is applied across all levels of our hierarchy. Our members may earn each other's admiration, and general respect is preferred behavior. While we do not expect our highly individualistic members to like each other, we encourage them to behave with courteous decorum when dealing with one another. Interaction is never required. In the case of extreme disagreement, wherein civility apparently cannot be maintained, we advocate that the involved members should cease such negative interaction." And now, let us finish this episode of Satansplain with a Satanecdote. As you regular listeners of Satansplain already know, one of the recurring segments we do is the Satanic Anecdote, otherwise known as the Satanecdote. Usually I read these from you, the listeners, when you send them into me, but then sometimes I give a little Satanecdote of my own. I did that in the previous episode, and I'm going to do it again in this episode. Some of you listeners may have already heard this one on YouTube. I put it on the Satansplain channel there. But I figured I'd make it part of an official Satansplain episode. This anecdote has a few minutes of backstory, but then ends with a prank call that I gave on a conspiracy theorist call-in show. Actually, it was a live cast stream on X, so I'm just going to play you the full audio version of all that, starting now. If you already heard it on YouTube, I will admit this is the same exact audio, but here we go. Hi folks, this is Magister Bill M, and this is not an actual full episode of Satansplain. Instead, I just wanted to make a quick video about a satanic anecdote of my own that just happened today, or of course, as we call those things on Satansplain, Satanecdotes.
Satanic anecdotes. Satanecdotes.
You see, recently on X, I saw a woman claiming the following. I interviewed a former high wizard in the Church of Satan. Blood sacrifice of an innocent is required for hexes. This, of course, is absolute bullshit. First of all, there is no rank in the Church of Satan called High Wizard. Second, and more importantly, this claim about us performing blood sacrifices, let alone being required for hexes, is a horrific lie she is telling about us. The Satanic Bible goes into great detail about this lie that Christians made up and continue to tell about us Satanists, and why such an act is in fact antithetical to Satanism. We reiterate this in the 11 Satanic Rules of the Earth as well. Our sources are all there in the public. The burden of proof is on the people claiming we do these crimes, and they can never provide any actual evidence. Or they'll try moving the goalposts to claim that it only happens in the higher levels. Of course, people who say that are too stupid to think through the logic of what they're saying and realize that it would make no sense for us to tell devil worshippers and all other losers to get lost when they approach the organization, and yet only wait until somebody knows and even talks to the media about rules and like the ones I listed, and then and only then go tell those people to just believe in the opposite and start doing baby sacrifices. Well, regardless, I noticed that this same woman was also hosting a live stream talk on X. She was hosting a discussion panel of alleged health professionals to talk about weight loss and eating right and all that, so of course I wanted to call in. Now, at first, I figured I could go storm this discussion, wait for the Q&A portion, and ask, hey, lady, why did you tell these lies about the Church of Satan sacrificing babies and stuff? But then I thought, nah, there are other people there who are just there to listen to a talk about health, and they don't care for whatever drama the host may have going on in her life. Not to mention that if her panel is full of Illuminati-believing conspiracy theorists, they probably believe in the same BS, and my challenge would only make her look more righteous or something. So I decided instead to go for something much more devilishly subtle. I proposed a question not to her, the host, but to one of the other health experts on the panel, just as anybody else would be expected to do in such a Q&A session. I asked something that sounded like a reasonable question you might hear in such a Q&A session, but at the same time, a trolling joke that only the host and the rest of you listeners in on the joke would get. And here's the recording of my question. The answer, to be fair, sounded informative, but I'll just fade out that part at the end.
Question from, I don't want to say Satansplain. Why'd you have to have Satan in your name? Go ahead and ask a question.
Well, that's part of an inside joke. Anyway, my question was for Dr. E quickly. He talked earlier about protein versus sugar, and I know a lot of manufactured snacks that people reach for are some kind of combination of the two. I know there were times in the past when I find myself in the dark of the night just craving to eat a baby Ruth bar or Snickers bar or Payday or similar. And I don't think it takes a wizard of nutrition to know there are better alternatives. I'm no wizard, but I guess my real question is just about nuts. The many nuts out there that maybe, I guess, lying to us on the package. I guess my question is, are just peanuts okay to satisfy hunger? Are there concerns with like a cup of nuts for a snack? I hear salty nuts can be bad. A lot of nuts are, salty. But is the solution to just have the nuts simply roasted, nothing added, or avoid them entirely? Or what do you think?
Thank you for your question. Dr. E, go ahead.
Yeah, sure. So nuts are interesting. I mean, it really depends on what you're trying to achieve. So if
you have been listening to Satansplain. For more information about the show, visit the official website at satansplain.com. And for more information about Satanism itself, visit churchofsatan.com. This episode, copyright 2025, Magister Bill M.